Okay, so Brittney, I've known you for, oh God, like 16 years, if not more.
It has to be more because I've been paralyzed for almost 18.
Okay, so like over 20 years.
Yeah.
Your family moved to Camrose when I was in grade 8, and your sister and I instantly clicked and became best friends. I was a common person at your house.
Yeah.
I think your parents just considered me another one of the kids. And then you guys sadly moved away to Grimshaw, right?
Grimshaw, yeah.
Grimshaw. And I remember Brett and I got into a fight one day, and I don't know what for, we were teens. I was in grade 10, I believe. And I remember coming home late one day with my dad, and my mom said, Brett called, and I remember saying, oh, God, what did she want? Because we were in a fight. And my mom said, I think you need to sit down. And she told me that you were in an accident. So why don't you explain exactly what happened that you remember?
It was December 2nd, 1999, and 6 14-year-olds decided to take some snowmobiles and head out and go snowmobiling at basically dusk. So it wasn't quite night yet, but it was kind of getting there. I remember the boys that were going, they said we were just going to go snowmobiling in the drainage ditch, which was just sort of like a field behind some of the houses in Grimshaw. And I'd gone there a few times before, so my mom said, sure, you can go. And at the time, she had a really bad toothache and wasn't feeling well, and I sort of like begged her to go, and she was just like, fine, go. And then we decided to go somewhere else, and I kind of was like, I don't really know whether I should be doing this, but, it'll be fine. And so we took off going towards one of the boys' acreages. So we were like traveling in the ditches and things like that on snowmobiles. And we got to this boy's acreage and stopped for a little bit. We had like hot chocolate and stuff, and then we took off because they were excited to show us like the hills around his house. And at that point, there was not enough helmets for everybody, so I switched snowmobiles. I got on a snowmobile with a boy named Blake, and I gave my helmet to another girl, and she went with another one of the boys that was on a different snowmobile. And so we took off, and that's really the last thing I remember. And from what everybody tells me after the fact, Blake and I got separated from the rest of the group, and they couldn't really find us, and so they started looking for us because we needed to go home and turn back. And they found us at the bottom of a 50-foot drop. So the hill comes up sort of one side looking rather shallow, and then it drops off just rather steep on the other side, and we were at the bottom. Blake was the snowmobile was upside down. I was on the bottom. Blake was in between myself and the snowmobile was flipped upside down. I had blood all over my face, and so I looked like I was really hurt. I was screaming, I couldn't feel my legs or anything, and Blake didn't have any visible injuries, so they just sort of lifted the snowmobile off, and he said, worry about Brittney. And so they were all trying to get me up the hill and, get me out of the sort of 50-foot drop, which at the time, not very safe, dragging somebody with a spinal cord injury up a hill, but they were all pretty young. And
they didn't know better.
Yeah, and then they left Blake at the bottom of the hill thinking that he was fine. And a few of the boys took off on another snowmobile to go to somebody's house to call 911. And the ambulance came, and we were, in an inaccessible area to vehicles. So all of the ambulance workers were on snowmobiles as well, trying to get to us. And they brought the the stretchers and everything. And by the time they showed up, Blake had passed away because he had severe internal bleeding.
Oh.
And yeah, they had gotten me, I think, up the hill to a point that the ambulance workers got me on the stretcher, and then they actually dragged me behind a snowmobile to the ambulance.
Kind of like how people tie sleds to the back of snowmobiles.
Yeah,
I used to do that.
I think so. I think that's exactly how it happened.
Crazy.
So, so yeah, it was a pretty devastating accident for a small town because Grimshaw is population about 2,500 people.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was a really small hospital.
When did you know that Blake had passed?
I really don't remember much from the first few weeks, and I remember being told a few different times, and it sort of being like a new thing, but I didn't know until 2 weeks after the funeral had already happened and everything. So yeah, it had a big impact on our community, and so yeah, that was the accident.
And so you paralyzed?
I was paralyzed. Yeah, I was paralyzed. I actually only broke one bone in the entire accident, and it was one vertebrae, and it was at T8. So that, for people that don't know, is mid-thoracic. So there's C vertebrae, which is your neck. There's T vertebrae, which is basically from chest to lower back, and then there's L, which is like just above your tailbone. And I broke T8, and there's 12 thoracic vertebrae, so almost to the bottom. And then after swelling and just aftermath of the accident, my function level is T6, so it's a few vertebrae up, just because the nerves swell a lot.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of scar tissue that happens right after you're injured, and it's actually to stop the nerve damage. So it's kind of a bad thing because it doesn't let you regenerate nerves in your spinal cord, but it's a protective mechanism so that the damage actually stops moving higher.
Okay.
So yeah, so T6 is my function level, and it's right at the mid-chest level.
Okay, so you can't feel from mid-chest.
Mid-chest down, and I'm a complete
Can you
injury.
move your toes?
Nope, can't move anything. So
No.
complete means you can't feel or move anything below your level of injury.
Okay.
And everybody's really different. So
Yeah, I can imagine
my brain still thinks I can feel my legs, so they always feel like they're tingling, like they're asleep and bent, but that's just neuropathic pain and phantom sensation.
Yeah, your brain wants to feel it.
Well, it's sort of like the memories from the area that you're injured in the spinal cord, because those nerve signals don't stop sending nerve signals back to your brain.
Yeah.
And it just sort of, the last thing it can remember how it felt is what it continually sends back. So I'm guessing that's how it felt right when I got hurt, and so that's what it always feels like. But I'm used to it now. It's just sort of a strange thing to, have the feeling of your legs in your head but not actually be able to feel it.
Yeah.
And I
Can
remember,
you feel it like if you slapped your leg?
no,
Nothing?
no, nothing. And I remember because when I was in the hospital, I didn't know I couldn't feel my legs. Like, I knew right after I was hurt because people said I was saying I can't feel my legs. But by the time, I woke up in the hospital, I thought they were asleep, like just tingling. Yeah. And so I didn't really even understand it when like the nurses were saying these things. Like, I was just like, what do you mean I can feel my legs?
Yeah.
And until physio started and a nurse came in and lifted my leg, my mom still remembers that being like it was like devastating for her, because she didn't really understand that I didn't understand that I was paralyzed. And when they lifted my leg, she said my face went white, because I was like, whoa, that was like my moment of understanding.
Yeah.
Like, nope, I can't feel my leg.
Oh,
So yeah, I that was a really vivid memory of mine where, they lifted my leg, and then it was kind of like, I get it now.
Yeah.
I get it now.
So then a whole new life. My dad used to say when I was released from the hospital that will never be normal again.
Mhm.
We have to find a new normal.
Yeah.
Your family definitely had to find a new normal. Like,
Yeah.
did they have to, because like you're in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
so did they have to get like renovations done on their house so that a wheelchair fits indoors?
Well,
and
for the first little while, it was really annoying because when we first moved back to Grimshaw, we got like a bi-level. So there's stairs up, stairs down.
Yeah.
And we lived in that for a little while. And then my parents decided to build a new house. So we got some money from insurance from it being a motor vehicle accident. So they used that to start building a new house. And it really didn't take that long. So I was injured in December 1999, and we moved into the house in 2000.
oh, okay.
So yeah, for a little while we were living in that house where my mom was carting me up and down the stairs, piggybacking me.
Yeah, I remember that house.
And then when we sold the house and the house was being built, I lived at my grandparents' for a while, which was a bungalow, so mostly accessible on the main floor, which was fine. But so yeah, it was a little bit of an adjustment that way.
Yeah.
I would say the external adjustments, like the outside being wheelchair accessible and all that, are a lot less cumbersome than the I guess the physical adjustments that you have to make to still manage like your bodily functions and stuff, that was like the much harder for me
Okay.
to deal with.
Like just learning how to tell that you need to go to the bathroom.
Well, the thing that drives me crazy is whenever people talk about being paralyzed, they never talk about bowel or bladder or anything like that. And you lose those functions, and then you have to learn how to manage them without being able to feel or control them. So, and I think when I was first paralyzed, I don't remember like going into like a depression or anything. I just remember sort of dissociating myself to the part of my body that I couldn't feel. And because I was, a teenager, and there's not very many people paralyzed at such a young age, they gave me credit for a lot of things that I was trying to do. And, it felt at the time like it was big steps, but knowing what I know now, I wish that they hadn't given me so much credit for, little steps, because I really needed to do more. And I ended up going home and just relying on my mom to do most everything for me. So when you're paralyzed, you have to use a catheter. And that was really difficult for me at first because I couldn't understand how I could possibly ever use a catheter if I can't feel.
Yeah.
And they tell you in the hospital, well, you'll be able to use touch technique and, you'll be able to do it. I just really didn't see how. So my mom ended up doing it. And then you have to do a bowel routine, which is basically just teaching your bowels how to work on their own and then leveraging timing. So you learn how to do your bowel routine certain days a week and stuff. And to me, that was just gross because sometimes you have to use suppositories and things like that. And I was just like, ew, I don't want to have to deal with that. So my mom ended up doing that for me as well. And I didn't really transfer myself or do anything like that. I just thought it was difficult. And when my mom started helping me, it just seemed easier. So I think that was like the biggest sort of adjustment for me. And really now as an adult and having become fully independent, one of the biggest challenges of having gone through, such a big injury. And probably what my biggest messages are for people is that, the transitions are hard, like so hard. But if you have to learn a new normal, just accept it, really. Embrace it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have all the answers like right away.
Yeah.
But trust that you are capable
Yeah.
of whatever it is that you're going through.
Yeah.
And I just, for so many years, didn't give myself really enough credit for being able to handle everything that I needed to handle. I give myself lots of grace too because I was a kid at the time.
Yeah. But look at you now. You can drive.
Yep.
You have 2 kids.
Yep. 2 kids.
Yeah. That you gave birth to.
Yep.
So you're a mom.
Mm-hmm.
You're married.
Mm-hmm.
You run a household. There's
Yeah.
nothing really you can't do except maybe run a marathon. But you can.
Yeah.
Wheel a marathon.
I could wheel a marathon.
Yeah.
Really, it all happened. All of that became possible with tough love. And I think part of the reason that I was able to stay so dependent on my mom is because I went from Edmonton to a small town where I didn't have any examples.
Yeah.
I didn't have any examples of how to be or who to follow. And so I just was doing what I thought was okay at the time. And when it was time for me to graduate high school, my mom was like, you're gonna move out of the house because you want to go to university. And I had a boyfriend at the time that I was moving in with, and she was like, I can't move in with you and do all this stuff. And really, I kind of hated her for like saying all this stuff. And like, it's so funny now that like, you know, we resent people for them telling us the things that we need to hear.
Yeah.
And I really did. I was just like, every time she wanted me to learn how to do stuff on my own, I just, you know, said, you don't know how hard my life is.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not fair. And I focused on that stuff instead of just focusing on, you know, the learning process. And when I eventually moved out, my mom came with me for a month, and she said, like, we have a month and then I'm going home. So whatever you have to do in that time to get yourself independent, whether it be, you know, with aids or by yourself, then, you know, that's what you have to do. So it was like the scariest time ever for me.
Yeah.
I had a month, I found the apartment, we moved in, and I had a month before my boyfriend was going to move in with me, which
Yeah.
was also really scary because I'm going from, you know, my mom doing so many personal things for me to then having to do them myself and share that space with another boy, which
Yeah.
he had been my boyfriend all through my teenage years, and he was actually at the accident with me, so he knew a lot, but we didn't talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Because it was just uncomfortable at the time. So yeah, my mom came with me, and I got fairly far on my own, and then decided, you know, I'm not ready to do this all by myself. I can't handle it. So I decided that I was going to get a personal care attendant. And so I phoned home care and got that in place. And really, that was like one of the biggest catalysts for me being independent, was really seeing how hard it is to rely on public help in those systems. And I have such a respect for people that need that help, because it's hard to find good people. And, you know, so it was really uncomfortable. The people weren't very good. But I still, it was, you know, it was a little difficult for me. So I was searching for examples, and I found a few people in the city through the Canadian Paraplegic Association. And the girl that I found, her name is Margaret Conquest, and she's a quadriplegic who was way more independent than I was, and was not afraid to tell me the things that I think, you know, the healthcare workers and that my mom and everybody should have been telling me years before,
Yeah.
which was that, you know, you're really taking your abilities for granted.
Yeah.
And, you know,
She was like your wake-up call.
a wake-up call, like, and seeing somebody who was worse than I was. She
Yeah.
didn't even have the use of her fingers, and she refused to use a power wheelchair. She could transfer herself, and I just couldn't see how any of that was possible. And then I also saw an adult physiatrist, because I'd been through the Glen Rose, which is the rehabilitation hospital, as a child, and didn't really have any great examples or doctors that were specific to spinal cord injury. And then when I turned 18, I was able to get access to the Glen Rose, like adult doctors. And I met a physiatrist named Dr. Guthrie, and who, like to this day, I still sort of refer to him as like my second dad. And he also gave me those like hard truths. And not in a mean way that's like, you know, in a harsh way that I needed to hear. And your life really can be as amazing as you want it to be. And I've always been sort of the person that I don't necessarily like jump on my own, but if somebody pushes me, I'm not gonna back down. I'm not gonna like stop. So when I heard those words, I started believing that my life could get better. And really that's all it took, was just a change in mindset.
Yeah.
To think, you know, this is all there is. And it wasn't like, again, I wasn't like super depressed, or, you know, like people always have this image of people after they get hurt, like they're depressed and they want to die, and it wasn't that. It was just, I was stuck. I didn't know where I could go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there wasn't social media at the time or any of that. So I really needed examples. And when I had them, then you know, my mind was different. And, you know, people always say mind over matter, but that really makes all the difference.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it took me, I think, a month, maybe a little more, and I went from being completely dependent on my mom and, you know, other people, to completely independent. I did not feel at all like a normal teenager when I had to rely on my mom to help me go to the bathroom. It takes a lot of your dignity away. Yeah. And I couldn't go anywhere, you know, to a party or anything without having to go home 4 hours later so my mom could help me go to the bathroom, which, but I know now what I know, and if I see people or parents who have children with disabilities, my biggest message to them is do not shelter them or do not coddle them. Yep. Make them do the things that they are going to have to do for their whole life, because you're robbing them of their independence. You're robbing them of their ability to do things. And as a mom now, I have a whole new perspective on allowing children to do things that they're capable of doing. Because it gives them confidence.
Can't feel anything, waist down, or chest down, basically. And you still get your period.
Yep.
So nothing really changes, like, so you still pee and poop and you still get your period.
Really, everything that happens, like, sort of autonomically still happens, and you really just have to manage it. So things are a little bit different, like reproductive wise. For women, really there's no change. For men, there's significant changes, and for men it really has to do with that they're sitting all the time, and that's it makes an inhospitable environment for sperm and things like that, and for all of those hormones and things. So men, that's why they have changes. So they have to do some things in order to manage their sperm motility and things like that. And there's tools out there that you can buy. But for women, it's really, really no change. And that's another one of the questions I always get about childbirth.
I was just going to ask.
Is, you know, can you still have babies? People have said, you know, just assume that I adopted my kids or something, which is silly, but I also am very understanding of people because they don't mean to be. Some women who are paralyzed, like myself, opt for elective C-sections, which I did, mostly because my mom never dilated properly. Okay. And so I was worried about that and didn't want to have to go through the complications. But I know many women who have natural births when they're paralyzed, and I was actually told by my obstetrician that for paralyzed women, it happens easier and faster because able-bodied women are in pain. Yeah. And they resist the birthing process. Whereas if you're paralyzed, it's not uncomfortable.
You don't feel anything.
Exactly. So your body just knows what to do. And I know my friend Teresa directly, and she had a natural birth, no problems. And then just on Facebook groups that I'm a part of with other wheelchair moms, countless stories of people having natural births, and I kind of wish I had given myself
watching this, whether they're a teenager or an adult or even a parent to somebody who's now paralyzed. What's one piece of advice you'd like to give them?
just trust yourself. Know that you can do anything that you put your mind to, and that you don't have to have all the answers in order for you to succeed.
Yeah.
Really, you'll get there, and I'm a testament to that. So
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you want to say? Talk about?
I don't think so. I don't know. Yeah, mostly like the messages that I was thinking about before were that, even if you don't have to do it yourself, if you get pushed, don't say no.